Hello everyone, Prime here. I hope you've had a good day. Now today we're going to be discussing Tyr versus Nemesis. Someone requested this a few weeks ago, and to be honest, at first I was thinking maybe I should move away from versus videos, but then no, I figured, hey, wait a minute. Tyr is representing a certain type of justice. Nemesis, another type of justice. So this could actually be a pretty interesting discussion to have, and that's the sort of angle we're going with this. It's not going to be like a standard Showdown video. It's more tackling sort of whose justice is better. If you guys wanted a straight up versus video, that's kind of woven in here, but it's not the main focus. So, yeah, I'm going to go over Tyr's rendition, or, Tyr's version of this whole Casey case here first. And, well, Tyr, first off, what version of Tyr is in Smite? Is Tyr in Smite a son of Odin? Was he a previous ruler of Asgard? See, it's a funny thing because in Norse mythology, there are a few different versions of Tyr's story. He might have been the son of a giant, he might have been the son of Odin, or he very well may have been the previous ruler of Asgard before Odin came along and took over. Now in Smite, there's no reference to Tyr being Odin's son, nor is there a reference to him actually being the previous ruler of Asgard. And especially because Tyr doesn't necessarily look that young or that old. He's got that sort of somewhat aged but somewhat middle-aged look to him, so I have no idea what the deal is with Tyr on that front. I suppose it doesn't necessarily make too much difference in the debate, but it's a nice thing to know about Tyr, Except that his age would probably give us an idea of his power. Of course, if Tyr is strong enough to lead an entire tribe of Asgardian gods, he's probably pretty powerful. If he's a son of Odin, always been on Odin's side, always working for Odin, never had any sort of conflict, never been in a position to rule the gods in any sense, probably not quite as strong, so I would assume. Now, what is arguably his greatest achievement was proving that he was the bravest and questionably perhaps the most selfless of the gods when he was the only one to offer his hand to keep the beast Fenrir at bay. I'm sorry to call Fenrir a beast, but yeah. See, it's quite a powerful thing, not just because he was the only one to man up and brave this dangerous beast, but also because Fenrir was most likely not someone who would have necessarily wanted to harm Tyr out of all the Aesir gods, purely because Tyr was the one that looked after Fenrir. He allowed Fenrir to grow into, partially to the size of Fenrir grew to, by feeding him, keeping him warm, allowing him a nice place to sleep, offering him companionship. People need company, and Fenrir is no different, right? So he was good to Fenrir. And so, to a degree, I'm sure it must have been a little difficult on that front for Tyr to break that connection with Fenrir. But then again, Fenrir was a giant monstrous wolf, so I'm sure it couldn't have been too bad after all. There's a quote from a certain anime the character makes, something about monsters and how have you ever seen a vicious beast that you sure you wouldn't cut? So, yeah, I think that definitely applies to this situation. Now, Smite Tyr, I think, as far as the strength department is concerned, he's incredibly strong. I mean, this man can do all manner of fancy things with one hand, so he's very dexterous, if you can ever find a use for Tyr's hands, if you ever need a pair of hands, Tyr's probably got you covered with just his one, because the things that he can do with that one hand in Smite. He's flipping around the swords, he's juggling people in the air with just one hand and a great sword. That's a heavy sword, it's not easy to do, and Tyr's just making all of the stuff he does seem effortless, like a child could do it. I don't even know if that was his dominant hand or if it was his weak hand that he sacrificed. I suppose he would have probably sacrificed his weak hand, not his dominant hand, because that doesn't make sense. And of course, as I said, pretty big sword. I'm not really a sword master by any means, but that's a pretty chunky piece of metal. I'm sure it has a decent weight to it. And Tyr can just carry it around, do all those fancy tricks. So he's definitely a strong man and he's very dexterous. So, those are good things to note about Tyr. He's also pretty agile. The man can jump into the air like nothing and then land on people in a pretty cool way, spectacular way. Of course, he's the god of the sky as well, and war, and justice, and the law. So, him flying, I suppose, is an extra thing. But yeah, it's just something that he rules over. But yeah, being a god of war from a pantheon dedicated to fighting and war and conflict, you'd think you'd have more merit in combat than a goddess of justice who boasts supreme knowledge over, knowing what is right and wrong. Because Nemesis' whole thing is that she makes a lot of her decisions and judgments and her divine retribution based on what best serves this balance. Nemesis acts to keep everything in balance, so if someone's really happy, really successful, really enjoying their lives, but it seems unfair the way that they got there, maybe they got to where they are by screwing people over, or they didn't really earn their position, then Nemesis might bump them down a peg, or if someone's supposed to be super down on their luck, Nemesis is supposed to prop them up and help them a bit. Now we'll get on to why that might be a bit questionable in just a sec, but most of the Greek gods have certain abilities and powers that they all share, like immortality, shape-shifting, and so on, things like that, and sort of future sight, things like that. Nemesis shouldn't be any different here, so let's say that she has those abilities. In the game, in Smite, she's pretty limber and agile, more so than Tyr, definitely. Her divine retribution is quite interesting. In terms of a fight, I'd think Nemesis would probably win at the very end of it, purely for the fact that she can tip the scales and the balance of the fight in her favor, and perhaps even undo some of the damage. If Tyr strikes a fatal blow on Nemesis, she can, to a degree it seems, tip the scales, undo it to a degree, and have Tyr suffer that damage. And Tyr has proven that he's very much capable of dying. He's very much capable of being injured and disabled. Most likely Nemesis wins. Because if Tyr does manage to get a decisive blow on Nemesis, she can just flip things and take it away from Tyr and then strike him down. That's how I more or less think a fight between the two of them go. If you're wondering, I have 100% Tyr bias. Okay, it's not that I don't like Nemesis, I've just not put much time into her, versus Tyr. He's one of the 5, 6 or so gods that are the reason why I would even continue to play the game, if I'm being 100% honest with you. He's, to me, arguably the most satisfying god to play in the game. Yet I still can see that he would lose to Nemesis. Okay, so here's the deal. This was going to be a 20-minute or so video, but I felt like making it a 20-minute video wouldn't do it justice, so I split it up into 2 parts. Half of it is, of course, what you just watched, and the other half will be sort of whose rendition of justice is the better version of justice between, of course, Tyr and Nemesis. So go ahead and tell me if you think I'm wrong about the versus battle, if you think I haven't really done much justice, if you'd prefer it done differently, or if you think Tyr would definitely swamp Nemesis. And of course, as always, if you enjoyed the video, go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel. Now, until the next video, a very good day. I've been Prime, and stay tuned for part 2. Bye bye.